Welcome to this deep exploration of the role of women in the Bible, a journey through time and faith that unveils the lives of extraordinary women whose stories echo across history and continue to shape our spiritual and cultural world today. Their names may not always be the first to come to mind, but their impact resounds powerfully throughout the sacred text. Women who stood boldly in their faith, challenged social norms, and changed the course of history. As we walk through their stories, we will uncover not only who they were, but how their faith and courage invite us into a larger understanding of God's sent for women, for men, and for all of humanity. We begin at the very dawn of creation, where the first woman, Eve, steps onto the stage of biblical history. Eve's story is complex, often misunderstood, sometimes unfairly blamed, but it is essential to understanding humanity itself. As the first woman created by God, Eve embodies the gift of life, companionship, and the profound mystery of free will. Through Eve, we glimpse the beginnings of human choice and consequence, of temptation and redemption. Her legacy is not only about the fall, but also about hope, a hope that would be fulfilled generations later through the coming of a Redeemer. Moving forward, we encounter Sarah, the wife of Abraham, whose faith was tested in extraordinary ways. Sarah's story is one of patience and trust. In her old age, she bore Isaac, the son through whom God's promises to Abraham's descendants would unfold. Sarah's life reveals how faith is often a journey filled with waiting and wondering, where God's timing defies human understanding but never fails. Her example challenges us to trust in the divine, even when circumstances seem impossible. From Sarah, we travel to the story of Hagar, the Egyptian servant who bore Abraham's first son, Ishmael. Hagar's experience in the wilderness, her encounter with the angel of the Lord, and her survival against the odds offer us a profound lesson on God's care for the marginalized and vulnerable. Hagar's story is a testament to God's grace that extends beyond the boundaries of promise and culture, reminding us that every person has inherent dignity and value. Then there is Rebekah, a woman chosen by God's providence to be the wife of Isaac and the mother of Jacob and Esau. Her story brings us into the complicated realities of family dynamics, faith, and divine plans that transcend human expectations. Rebekah's decisive role in shaping the lineage of Israel shows us how women as choices are often pivotal in the unfolding of God's covenantal promises. We cannot forget Leah and Rachel, the two sisters whose rivalry and love story intersect with the birth of the 12 tribes of Israel. Their lives reveal the struggles women faced in ancient times, from jealousy to longing, but also highlight the enduring power of faith to create legacy. Through their children, these women helped to shape the nation of Israel, their lives intertwined with the very identity of God's people. As we move into the time of Moses, a figure central to Israel's history, the story of Miriam, Moses' sister, stands out. Miriam was not only a protective sister, but a prophetess and a leader in her own right. Her song of praise after the crossing of the Red Sea is one of the earliest hymns of worship in Scripture, a powerful testament to faith in God's deliverance. Miriam's presence reminds us that women in the Bible were not silent or passive, but active participants in God's plan. At the heart of the wilderness wanderings is the story of Deborah, the prophetess and judge who led Israel in a time of crisis. Deborah's leadership defied the social expectations of her era, showing courage, wisdom, and faith in the midst of warfare and national turmoil. Her story challenges the assumption that leadership was solely a male domain and points us to the reality that God equips and calls women for mighty tasks. From Deborah's time, we are drawn to the story of Ruth, a Moabite woman whose loyalty and faithfulness led her into the heart of Israel's story. Ruth's commitment to her mother-in-law Naomi, her embrace of the God of Israel, and her role as the great-grandmother of King David highlight the inclusive and redemptive nature of God's plan. Ruth teaches us about covenant loyalty, faith in new beginnings, and how outsiders can become part of God's family. Next, the narrative brings us to the enigmatic figure of Hannah, whose deep longing for a child and heartfelt prayer moved God's heart. Hannah's story is a powerful example of faith expressed through vulnerability and persistence. Her son Samuel would become one of Israel's greatest prophets, underscoring how God often answers prayers in unexpected ways and uses human pain for divine purposes. As we continue, the story of Bathsheba emerges with complexity and depth. Often remembered for the scandals surrounding King David, Bathsheba's life also reveals the resilience and influence of a woman who became the mother of Solomon, Israel's wisest king. Through her, we see themes of grace, repentance, and the enduring power of God's covenant, even amidst human failure. We then step into the era of the prophets and kings to meet Esther, the Jewish queen, who risked her life to save her people from destruction. Esther's story is one of courage, divine providence, and bold advocacy. She used her position not for personal gain, but for the protection of her people, teaching us about the power of bravery and the importance of standing up for justice. Following Esther, the life of Anna the prophetess unfolds quietly yet significantly. As an elderly woman who worshipped continually in the temple, Anna's faithful presence welcomed the infant Jesus and recognized him as the promised Messiah. Her story reminds us that faithfulness in small, consistent acts has profound spiritual impact. No discussion of biblical women would be complete without turning to Mary, the mother of Jesus, whose life is a cornerstone of Christian faith. Mary's humility, obedience, and trust in God's plan changed the course of history. From the angel's announcement to the crucifixion and resurrection of her son, Mary's journey embodies a deep spiritual surrender and strength. Her presence invites us into the mystery of incarnation and the profound role women have in God's redemptive story. Alongside Mary, Mary Magdalene emerges as a powerful witness to Jesus' ministry, death, and resurrection. Once troubled, she became a devoted follower and the first to proclaim the resurrection to the disciples. Mary Magdalene's story challenges misconceptions and highlights the transformative power of grace, the importance of faithful discipleship, and the pivotal role women played in the early church. The Gospels also introduce us to other women who encountered Jesus, such as the Samaritan woman at the well, the woman caught in adultery, and the hemorrhaging woman, each illustrating diverse ways women experienced healing, forgiveness, and new life through faith. These encounters reveal Jesus' radical respect for women and his willingness to break cultural barriers to bring hope and restoration. As we transition to the Acts of the Apostles and the early church, women like Priscilla emerge as key leaders and teachers in the Christian community. Priscilla, along with her husband Aquila, instructed Apollos, an eloquent preacher, showing how women played vital roles in shaping early Christian theology and community life. We also meet Lydia, a successful businesswoman and one of the first European converts to Christianity, whose hospitality and faith helped establish the church in Philippi. Lydia's story highlights how faith and entrepreneurship intersected in the ancient world, and how women's resources and leadership were crucial to the spread of the gospel. Throughout the epistles, women such as Phoebe, a deaconess commended by Paul, and Eunia, noted as an apostle, continue to appear as examples of faithful service and leadership. Their mention disrupts modern assumptions about women as roles in church history and calls us to reconsider the fullness of God's calling for all believers. In reflecting on these stories, we see a recurring theme. Women in the Bible are often at the margins of society, but at the center of God's redemptive plan. Their stories challenge patriarchal norms and invite us to recognize the essential roles women have played and continue to play in the life of faith communities. Beyond their historical and spiritual significance, these women offer timeless lessons. They teach us about faith in the face of uncertainty, courage in times of danger, hope amid despair, and the power of obedience to God's call. Their lives are not relics of the past, but living examples that inspire us today. As we continue this journey, we will delve deeper into lesser-known figures and explore how their lives and faith influence not only biblical history, but also the wider world. We will examine the roles women played in prophecy, teaching, healing, and leadership, discovering a tapestry of faith that is rich, diverse, and profoundly impactful. Together, we will also explore how these biblical stories resonate with contemporary discussions about gender, leadership, and spirituality. How do these ancient women challenge modern perspectives? What can we learn from their struggles and triumphs about our own faith journeys? We will journey through the Psalms and wisdom literature to uncover the voices of women who contributed to biblical poetry and teaching, often hidden or attributed anonymously. Their wisdom continues to speak to us, inviting us to live with integrity, compassion, and reverence. Furthermore, we will explore how women in the Bible modeled hospitality, mentorship, and discipleship, shaping the fabric of community life. Their stories reveal the profound influence of relationships built on faith and love. This exploration is not only a look back at history, but also a call forward, an invitation to recognize the ongoing role of women in faith communities today. The biblical witness challenges us to embrace the fullness of God's gifts in all people, breaking down barriers and celebrating diversity in spiritual leadership. And as we move forward, we will consider how the legacy of these women has been remembered, celebrated, or sometimes overlooked throughout church history and culture. What have been the consequences of these narratives for women in faith? How might we reclaim and honor these stories in new and powerful ways? So join me as we continue to uncover the remarkable stories of women whose faith changed the course of history, whose courage broke chains, and whose devotion to God laid foundations for generations to come. The journey is far from over, and the stories we have yet to tell are as compelling as those we have already encountered. Stay with me as we turn to new chapters, new women, and new lessons that illuminate the powerful role women have played and still play in the unfolding story of God's people. As we continue our journey through the Bible's tapestry of women, it becomes clear that their stories often unfold in moments of crisis, transformation, and divine encounter, moments where their faith not only sustains them, but shifts the course of entire communities and nations. Beyond the familiar names, there are other powerful women whose roles, while sometimes subtle or briefly mentioned, wield tremendous influence in the unfolding narrative of God's work among his people. Consider Jochebed, the mother of Moses, Aaron, and Miriam. Though her story is often overshadowed by her famous son, Jochebed's courage and faith are foundational. In a time when Hebrew male infants faced death under Pharaoh's decree, she entrusted Moses to the waters of the Nile, an act of faith that saved not just her child, but the future deliverer of Israel. Her quiet strength and trust in God's providence remind us of the often unseen but vital roles mothers and caregivers have in shaping destiny. Moving to the book of Judges, the story of Jael emerges as a striking example of bravery and divine intervention. Jael, a woman of unexpected boldness, played a critical role in Israel's victory over Sisera, the enemy general. Her story challenges traditional notions of power, showing how a woman's courage, even in a domestic setting, can become a turning point in history. Jael's act of decisive action highlights the theme that God's purposes often unfold through unexpected agents. The prophetic tradition in Israel is also enriched by women who spoke God's word with authority. Huldah the prophetess stands as one of the most notable. During a time of religious reform under King Josiah, Huldah's prophetic confirmation of the book of the law found in the temple led to a revival of covenant faithfulness. Her role affirms that God's voice speaks through women and that their spiritual authority was recognized and respected, even in the highest councils. In the midst of exile and restoration, women like Nehemiah's wife and others in the post-exilic period contributed to the rebuilding of Jerusalem and the renewal of Israelite identity. Though not always named, Their participation in community restoration efforts reflects the integral part women played in sustaining faith and culture through difficult seasons. Turning to the New Testament, the role of women expands dramatically, intersecting with the life and ministry of Jesus in ways that break cultural boundaries. Women are among his most devoted followers, patrons, and witnesses. The story of Salome, often identified as the mother of the sons of Zebedee, showcases a mother's boldness in requesting a place for her sons in Jesus' coming kingdom. This moment invites reflection on the ambitions and hopes of women in the early Christian movement and the lessons Jesus taught about true greatness and servanthood. Another important figure is Joanna, mentioned in Luke's Gospel, who supported Jesus' ministry financially and was among the first to witness his resurrection. Joanna's involvement illustrates the vital support network women provided, allowing the message of the kingdom to spread effectively. Her story invites us to consider the often overlooked ways women as resources and commitment fueled the earliest Christian communities. As the narrative unfolds in Acts, we see women like Tabitha, also known as Dorcas, known for her acts of charity and kindness. Her resurrection by Peter is a powerful testament to her significance in the early church and highlights the life-giving impact of women's service and generosity. Tabitha's story underscores the truth that ministry is not confined to preaching or teaching alone, but is lived out through tangible love and care. Further along, the epistle letters offer glimpses into the lives of women who shaped early Christian practice. Take Euodia and Syntyche, two women in the church at Philippi, whom Paul urges to reconcile their differences for the sake of unity. This plea reveals that women were active participants in the life and struggles of the church, capable of leadership and influence, yet also human with conflicts to resolve. Their example encourages us to see the church as a community where women as voices and relationships are vital to its health. The narrative also introduces Nympha, who hosted a house church in Colossae, demonstrating how women's homes often served as spiritual hubs where believers gathered, worshiped, and were nurtured in faith. This pattern reminds us that leadership and ministry frequently happen in domestic and relational contexts, underscoring the diversity of ways God equips his people. Examining the broader biblical context, we find women described as sages and wisdom figures, such as the woman of valor in Proverbs 31. This portrait celebrates industriousness, compassion, and spiritual depth. It challenges simplistic stereotypes by portraying a woman who is a leader, provider, and moral compass in her household and community. The wisdom woman invites us to recognize the multifaceted roles women hold and the profound impact of their daily faithfulness. Delving into apocryphal and intertestamental writings, we uncover even more rich traditions about women who embody faith and leadership. Although not included in the Protestant canon, books like Judith and Susanna provide powerful narratives of women who confront injustice and preserve God's people through courage and wisdom. These stories, cherished in various Christian traditions, deepen our understanding of how women's faithfulness resonates across time and cultures. The influence of biblical women extends beyond their own time, as their stories have inspired countless generations to faith and action. Throughout church history, women have modeled spiritual devotion, scholarship, and martyrdom in ways rooted deeply in these biblical examples. From early Christian saints to modern-day leaders, the legacy of biblical women echoes in movements of renewal, justice, and service. We also observe how these women's lives intersect with larger biblical themes: redemption, covenant, sacrifice, and hope, revealing that the biblical narrative is incomplete without their presence. Their stories embody God's work of bringing light into darkness, healing brokenness, and empowering the humble. As we reflect on these narratives, questions arise that resonate deeply with contemporary believers. How do these ancient stories challenge our understanding of gender and leadership in faith today? What do these women teach us about resilience in the face of adversity? How does their example shape our approach to community, worship, and mission? In the unfolding biblical drama, The presence of women as prophets, judges, mothers, disciples, and leaders points to a divine pattern of inclusion and empowerment. Their lives invite ongoing exploration and discovery, continual unwrapping of layers that reveals new insights into the heart of God and the nature of faithful living. With every story, new connections emerge between women across centuries, between the Old and New Testaments, and between biblical history and our present-day experience. These links form a rich mosaic that challenges us to see God's plan as inclusive, dynamic, and full of surprises. As we journey onward, we will examine more stories of women whose faith shaped not only their immediate context, but also the wider world, influencing art, culture, theology, and social movements. The exploration of these women's roles opens the door to understanding the powerful intersection of faith, gender, and history in ways that are both ancient and urgently relevant. And so, the story continues inviting us to listen, learn, and be inspired by the remarkable women of the Bible, whose legacy is alive and vibrant, calling us forward into faithfulness and courage. As we delve deeper into the biblical narrative, it is essential to consider the ways in which women contributed, not only through their individual stories, but also as symbols and embodiments of broader spiritual truths. One such figure is Martha, the sister of Mary and Lazarus, whose interactions with Jesus reveal important lessons about faith, service, and devotion. Martha's hospitality and active service contrasted with Mary's contemplative listening, both equally valued by Jesus. This dynamic between action and contemplation invites us to reflect on the diverse ways faith can be expressed and lived out. In this same family, Mary of Bethany offers us a portrait of devotion that centers on worship and attentiveness to the Word. Her choice to sit at Jesus' feet, absorbing his teaching, highlights the importance of prioritizing spiritual nourishment amid life's busyness. Mary's story encouraged believers to balance the demands of service with the need for intimate relationship with God. Moving beyond the immediate circle of Jesus, the story of the Syrophoenician woman in the Gospel of Mark provides a remarkable example of persistence and faith breaking cultural barriers. This woman, a Gentile, boldly approached Jesus seeking healing for her daughter, and despite initial resistance, her unwavering faith compelled Jesus to grant her request. Her story illustrates the expanding scope of God's grace beyond Israel, affirming that faith knows no ethnic or social boundaries. Likewise, the account of the woman caught in adultery challenges us to consider themes of mercy, justice, and restoration. When the crowd brought her to Jesus, expecting condemnation, he instead offered forgiveness and a call to transformation. This story powerfully highlights Jesus' radical approach to sin and redemption, with a particular sensitivity to those often marginalized or condemned by society. In the realm of healing, the story of the bleeding woman who touched Jesus' garment reveals the intersection of faith, desperation, and divine power. Despite years of suffering and social exclusion, her courage to reach out led to her restoration. This moment underscores the profound personal encounters with Christ that women experienced, often in defiance of cultural norms. Turning to the earliest followers of Jesus after his resurrection, Mary, the mother of James and Joseph, stands among those who remained steadfast in faith amidst turmoil. Her presence at the cross and her role in the early community highlight the often overlooked support women provided during the foundational days of the church. The daughters of Philip, mentioned briefly in Acts as prophetesses, remind us that women's prophetic voices continued to echo in the life of the early church. Their prophetic gifts indicate that women were active participants in spiritual leadership and the discernment of God, thus direction for the fledgling Christian movement. When we explore the writings of the Apostle Paul, it becomes clear that women such as Crispus' household and others were among the first converts in various cities, suggesting that women often formed the backbone of early Christian communities. Their faith and hospitality created spaces where the gospel could be heard, believed, and lived out. Additionally, the mention of Nereus and his sister, commended by Paul in Romans, suggests that women in the early church held positions of honor and influence, breaking assumptions about the roles women could occupy within the community. Beyond leadership and discipleship, the wisdom literature gives us insight into the poetic voices of women like the Shulamite woman in the Song of Solomon. Her passionate and poetic voice celebrates love, desire, and beauty, offering a sacred affirmation of human relationships and emotions. This poetic dialogue invites reflection on how biblical texts honor the feminine voice in expressions of intimacy and longing. The Proverbs woman, often called the woman of noble character, continues to inspire as a model of strength, dignity, and wisdom. She is portrayed as a provider, counselor, and spiritual guide, someone who cultivates life and virtue in her household and community. This figure serves as a reminder that biblical femininity encompasses courage, intellect, and influence. As we consider these women, we begin to see the diversity of roles they played: mothers, leaders, prophets, servants, witnesses, and warriors. Each role contributes to a broader biblical vision of women as integral to God's unfolding story. In examining the historical and cultural context of these narratives, we recognize that many of these women operated within patriarchal societies that often limited their public roles. Yet, through divine empowerment and personal courage, they transcended these limitations, shaping spiritual history in profound ways. Their stories offer encouragement to those who face marginalization today, illustrating how faith can empower the powerless to become agents of change. The impact of these biblical women also extends into the arts and literature throughout history. Their stories have inspired painters, poets, and musicians who sought to capture their strength and grace. From Renaissance masterpieces to contemporary worship songs, the legacy of biblical women continues to influence culture and faith expression worldwide. Moreover, the study of these women sheds light on how gender dynamics in biblical times were both challenged and upheld. The narratives demonstrate moments of radical inclusion, where God calls women to leadership and prophecy, and moments of cultural constraint, where women's voices were silenced or minimized. This tension invites ongoing reflection on how communities today might embody the full dignity and calling of every person. Turning again to the New Testament, the story of Phoebe, who is described as a deacon and a benefactor of many, exemplifies the financial and leadership roles women took on in the church. Her example shows us that women were not only spiritually active, but also materially invested in the growth of early Christianity. Similarly, Prisca, or Priscilla, stands as a compelling figure who partnered with her husband Aquila in teaching and mentoring, including instructing Apollos, a prominent preacher. Prisca's involvement highlights the collaborative ministry of couples and the authoritative teaching roles women held. The recurring theme of hospitality, seen in women like Lydia and Nympha, emphasizes how women shaped the early church by opening their homes as centers for worship, fellowship, and mission. This hospitality was not merely domestic, but a vital form of ministry that facilitated the spread of the gospel. Even within Paul's epistles, the mention of women who labored alongside him illustrates the indispensable role women played in missionary efforts, teaching, and church planting. Their dedication challenges later restrictions placed on women's roles and calls for a renewed appreciation of their foundational contributions. The biblical record also reveals that women were witnesses to many of the pivotal events in Jesus' life, his birth, ministry, death, and resurrection positions of both honor and responsibility. Their witness was critical in authenticating the resurrection, the cornerstone of Christian faith. As we continue to explore, we will discover how these biblical women's faith and actions laid the groundwork for ongoing conversations about the role of women in spiritual leadership. Their stories provide a rich foundation for contemporary discussions on equality, vocation, and the ways the church can embrace the full participation of women. This exploration invites us to question assumptions, broaden our understanding of biblical leadership, and embrace a vision of community where all gifts are valued and nurtured. And so, as we keep unfolding the stories of these remarkable women, new insights and questions arise about faith, culture, and the unfolding mission of God in the world. Their lives continue to challenge, inspire, and call us deeper into the mystery of God's inclusive love. As we journey deeper into the biblical narrative, another remarkable dimension of women's roles emerges through their participation in spiritual rituals and temple worship. Women like Elizabeth, the mother of John the Baptist, exemplify this connection. Elizabeth's story is one of divine favor and miraculous blessing, especially given her barrenness and advanced age. Her faithfulness in prayer and worship prepared the way for John, who would herald the coming of Jesus. Her encounter with Mary during the visitation is a profound moment of mutual encouragement between two expectant mothers, highlighting the vital role women played in sustaining faith through intercession and prophetic affirmation. Exploring further, we find the figure of Anna the prophetess, an elderly woman devoted to worship and fasting in the temple. Her story demonstrates the significance of persistent prayer and faithful presence. Anna's recognition of the infant Jesus as the Messiah shows that women were active spiritual observers and affirmers of God's promises, often in quiet, consistent ways that bore great fruit. The lives of many unnamed women throughout Scripture also invite our attention. Women who served as midwives in Egypt, who cared for the sick, who prepared the dead for burial, and who provided financial support to ministries, all contributed profoundly to the spiritual and social life of Israel and the early church. Their stories, often untold, remind us that the fabric of biblical history is woven not only by famous figures, but also by countless faithful women whose labor was essential. Turning to the book of Ruth, it is important to notice the socioeconomic and cultural context in which Ruth lived. Foreign widow who chose to embrace the God of Israel and care for her mother-in-law Naomi. Ruth's decision to leave her homeland and adopt a new identity is an extraordinary testament to faith and loyalty. Her story challenges cultural boundaries and reminds us that faithfulness often requires sacrifice and boldness to step into the unknown. Moreover, Ruth's marriage to Boaz and her inclusion in the lineage of David highlight the ways God's providence works through unexpected channels. Another compelling figure is Judith, whose story, though found in the Apocrypha, has inspired countless readers and artists. Judith's courage in confronting the enemy general, Holofernes, to save her people, showcases the power of faith-fueled bravery and strategic action. Her narrative raises important reflections on the intersection of gender, power, and divine justice. In the prophetic books, the figure of the daughter of Zion often symbolizes the city of Jerusalem as a woman in distress, but also one destined for restoration and glory. This metaphorical use of the feminine highlights the poetic and symbolic importance of women's identities within biblical theology, portraying both vulnerability and hope. Women also played crucial roles in moments of national crisis and reform. Consider Jezebel, a controversial queen whose negative influence in Israel reminds us of the dangers of idolatry and moral corruption. Though often seen as an antagonist, her presence in the biblical story serves as a cautionary example of how women in power could impact society, for better or worse, highlighting the complexities of leadership and influence. On the other hand, Athaliah, another queen of Judah, presents a darker chapter in biblical history. Her usurpation of the throne and subsequent reign of terror challenge us to reflect on the misuse of power and the resilience of faith communities who opposed her. The story of Athaliah's overthrow by faithful priests and leaders underscores the ongoing tension between righteous and unrighteous authority. Shifting to the New Testament, the story of Mary of Clopas at the cross provides a poignant portrait of steadfast faith and presence amid suffering. As one of the women who remained near Jesus during his crucifixion, Mary of Clopas exemplifies loyalty and courage in the face of despair, offering a powerful example of contemplative strength. Women were also central to the nurturing and mentoring of the early Christian faith. Lois and Eunice, mother and grandmother of Timothy, are commended by Paul for their sincere faith, which they passed on to Timothy. Their role in spiritual formation highlights the importance of intergenerational faith transmission and the powerful impact women have as teachers and mentors. The Acts of the Apostles gives glimpses into women who hosted churches and helped sustain the fledgling Christian movement through hospitality and leadership. The household of Nympha, for instance, provided a meeting place for believers, showing that women's homes were critical centers for community building and worship. Beyond individual stories, we can also reflect on the theological significance of women in biblical typology and symbolism. For example, the figure of wisdom in Proverbs is often personified as a woman, portraying divine truth, insight, and guidance in feminine imagery. This personification invites deeper reflection on the feminine aspects of God's nature and the value of feminine wisdom in spiritual life. In the New Testament, the motif of the bride of Christ draws on feminine imagery to describe the church's relationship with Jesus, portraying intimacy, covenant, and devotion. This imagery elevates the feminine to a central place in Christian theology and invites believers into a relational understanding of faith. In examining the roles of women in the Bible, it is also vital to acknowledge the social and cultural limitations they faced, limitations that their stories often transcend. Many biblical women navigated patriarchal structures with remarkable agency, resilience, and faith, challenging assumptions and opening new paths for spiritual leadership and influence. As we continue this exploration, we encounter women who contributed to the Bible's preservation and transmission. Women in biblical times were often responsible for oral storytelling and teaching younger generations, preserving history, law, and faith in times when written texts were scarce. Their role as custodians of memory and faith is indispensable. Moreover, archaeological and historical research increasingly uncovers evidence of women's participation in religious rites, economic activities, and community leadership in ancient Israel and early Christian contexts. This growing body of knowledge enriches our understanding of the multifaceted roles women played and invites ongoing reassessment of biblical narratives. The legacy of these women reaches far beyond the biblical text, influencing Christian worship, doctrine, and social structures through the centuries. Their examples have inspired women to pursue vocations in ministry, education, and social justice, shaping the course of church history and culture. Theological reflections on these women also reveal deep insights into God's character and kingdom values, justice, mercy, inclusion, and empowerment. The stories of women in the Bible challenge us to embrace a faith that honors every person's gifts and calls us to embody God's transformative love in the world. As we move forward, new questions arise. How can the church today more fully recognize and celebrate the contributions of women? In what ways can the stories of biblical women inform contemporary debates about gender, leadership, and spirituality? What new voices and perspectives might emerge as we continue to explore these ancient narratives? This ongoing conversation opens doors to fresh understanding and renewed commitment to the inclusive and liberating spirit of the gospel, inviting believers to walk boldly in the footsteps of the women who have gone before. And so, our exploration deepens, with new stories and insights awaiting discovery, each one adding to the rich mosaic of faith, courage, and divine purpose embodied by women throughout biblical history. As we come to this point in our journey through the powerful and profound role of women in the Bible, it's clear that their stories are not mere footnotes in history, but vibrant threads woven deeply into the fabric of faith and redemption. From the first woman, Eve, whose life set the stage for humanity's story, to the courageous heroines like Deborah, Esther, and Ruth, From the faithful mothers like Hannah and Elizabeth to the devoted followers of Jesus like Mary Magdalene and Joanna, each woman carries a unique voice that speaks across the ages. Together, their lives illustrate a remarkable spectrum of faith experiences: courage in the face of danger, steadfastness amid suffering, wisdom that guided nations, humility that embraced God's plan, and devotion that ignited the earliest Christian community. These women defied cultural norms and barriers, showing us that God's call and purpose know no gender limits. Their stories remind us that faith is lived in many ways, through bold leadership and quiet service, through vocal prophecy and loving hospitality, through perseverance in prayer and fearless action. Women in the Bible were prophets, warriors, teachers, and nurturers, roles that reveal God's inclusive vision for all his people. As we reflect on their legacy, we see how these biblical women not only shaped the spiritual history of Israel and the early church, but also continue to inspire believers today to embrace their gifts and live boldly in their faith. Their courage and devotion challenge us to stand firm in our convictions, to love sacrificially, and to pursue justice and mercy with unwavering passion. This exploration is more than a recounting of ancient stories. It's an invitation to recognize the invaluable contributions of women in the ongoing story of God's kingdom, an invitation to listen anew to their voices, to learn from their example, and to carry forward their legacy of faith into our own lives and communities. And while we pause here, the story of women in God's unfolding plan is far from complete. Their impact echoes still in the church, in families, in communities worldwide, and invites us to continue discovering, celebrating, and living out the fullness of God's purpose for every person. So as we close this chapter, let us carry forward the lessons, the inspiration, and the faithfulness of these remarkable women. Their stories empower us to walk courageously, love deeply, and serve faithfully, knowing that just as God used them in extraordinary ways, he calls each of us to be part of his redemptive work today.